by approving a 650 megawatt power plant powered by fracked gas that emits 2.1 million tons of greenhouse gases every year, New York energy policy has turned a once pristine, critical environment area into a sacrifice zone.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org. You know the actor James Cromwell from his many roles, from the farmer in Babe the Pig to the senior scientist in I, Robot, and many more roles. He's also an activist on climate and other issues. I interviewed him last summer in Philadelphia just before the great anti-fracking march. A few days ago, he was sentenced to a week in jail for refusing to pay a fine in Orange County, New York, in connection with an action he took part in to try to stop the building of a huge methane burning power plant in Orange County. Here, he and others speak in January.
A mother, an actor, and a grandmother padlocked themselves together to protest a $900 million power plant. This is one half of the way on to 6. It was a necessary escalation as well as a metaphor. By approving a 650 megawatt power plant powered by fracked gas that emits 2.1 million tons of greenhouse gases every year, New York energy policy has turned a once pristine, critical environment area into a sacrifice zone, locking us all together in a fossil fuel dependency for the next 30 years.
Despite the rhetoric of 50% renewable by 2030, Governor Cuomo's approval of the CPV Valley Energy Plant demonstrates his actual intent. He has no problem using, transporting, storing, or furthering our dependence on fracked gas.
In fact, the CPV power plant alone would support 22 fracking wells in Pennsylvania every year. So while our governor said no to fracking, he said yes to fracked gas. This is not only incoherent, it's a frack your neighbor energy policy.
Our national and state energy policy is like a 2-lane highway. One lane represents public health and the other climate change. And our governor is speeding down that highway at 100 miles per hour. But where's it headed? Well, we keep being told that there's a mythical bridge that will supposedly take us to some kind of sustainable future. But did you ever try to stand on a bridge made of gas?
No way. We're actually hurtling towards a future called climate disaster. The 3.7 degree highway is an environmental catastrophe paved entirely with fracked gas. Our renewable energy goals have become a mirage. We need to be 100% renewable now. If we want to continue living on this planet, we must leave all fossil fuels in the ground. If Cuomo is truly serious about his own goals, then why permit even one more fossil fuel plant? He already has more than 50% quota, and CPV is just the beginning. Cricket Valley in Dover has also been approved. Plus there's a mystery gas plant being planned along the Constitution.
We have to understand that power plants are anchor projects, and they drive the rest of the infrastructure. Frack gas, doesn't get to the power plants by FedEx, You need thousands of miles of pipeline and hundreds of compressor stations, metering stations, and storage facilities.
From the CPV Valley power plant which has been fully approved and is currently under construction, to the AIM pipeline, also under construction, right next to the Indian Point spent fuel rods, to the Constitution pipeline, already pushing to begin tree clearing, followed closely by NED. New York is under siege by the gas industry. We must demand that our elected officials safeguard public health and safety, as well as protect our shared natural environment. It's our children's future and their children's, if we're lucky.
You know, the gas industry is just like a drug dealer who never stops pushing, and they have vast expansion plans, especially here in New York, which they see as a vital transportation corridor and market for frack gas. And our state is the 5th largest consumer of frack gas in the country, and our governor is totally hooked.
We need an urgent 3-step program. First and foremost, we must stop building new fossil power plants, especially those that use fracked gas. This means we must stop CPV and all the other power plants that are in the works. 2, resist all gas infrastructure development by any means necessary. Subsidize and develop only 100% wind, water, and solar energy resources.
We're at a fork in the road of our so-called energy highway, and if you look past the headlines and separate reality from rhetoric, you'll see that we're about to take the wrong road.
We must demand that our elected officials change course. Trojan horses like REV, that's the Reforming Energy Vision, are riddled with deception and ambiguity. We must clean up the language of REV, get rid of its support for gas, and make REV relevant to the world we want. We must speak with one unified voice, just as we did 2 years ago, when we said, not one well. Now we must say, not one sacrifice zone, not 1 mile of pipeline, not 1 megawatt of fossil fuel.
We must join with frontline communities across our state, in Westchester and in Minisink and in Pennsylvania, the people who shared their tragic stories with us to help us get the fracking ban, and now demand an ethical energy plan, because climate justice is community justice, and community justice is energy justice.
Our work isn't done yet. We must be vigilant. Fighting pipelines and power plants are the next struggles. Fracked gas is an existential threat to us all. It is the 5 minutes to midnight for frontline communities, and we all know that. When it comes to climate change, we are all living in the same time zone. Now is the time to take the pledge to defend the lives of all sentient beings on this planet. Join us. There are people walking around with clipboards. Sign the pledge. Refuse and resist fracked gas in our state.
No fracked gas! 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 No fracked gas!
They're right. These natural gas plants are atrocities. We have been stressing the findings of climate scientist Robert Howarth, who warns that the world will pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit around 2030. Recently, the prestigious science magazine Nature came out with an article that said we've been too optimistic. It cited a study that said we have 3 years, just 3 years, to get the amount of greenhouse gases that we shoot into the air every year to start decreasing. Last week, we talked about the persecution of Palestinian Issa Amro. Now for some background from the Institute for Middle East Understanding.
We are in Youth Against Settlement working to document the human rights violations and expose all the violations in the international community media. We are trying to recruit the Palestinian youth to join non-violence resistance to end the Israeli occupation and dismantle the Israeli settlement. It's the most well-known non-violence center in Hebron. I studied all the history of non-violence, Mandela to Martin Luther King to Gandhi, all of them. This made the Israeli occupation forces target us to silence us.
You are in my house. You are disturbing me.
In our city, in our occupied city, we don't have any basic rights to live equal with everybody else in the world.
I come from the city of Hebron in Palestine, where the Palestinians are suffering from apartheid, discrimination and displacement.
Everybody is a target. Every single stone tree here is a target for the Israeli occupation.
I hope to continue protecting human rights defenders around the world.
Now another IMEU video about how little life has changed for Palestinians after 50 years of Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. Next to efforts to prevent Congress from taking away health care from 22 million people. It includes Stephanie Woodward from the disabled group ADAPT being dragged from her wheelchair during a protest.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump urged the Republican Congress today to repeal the Affordable Care Act, even as senators recessed for the holidays early yesterday, with no plans in sight to vote on a replacement health care bill. In a tweet early this morning, President Trump tweeted, "If Republican senators are unable to pass what they're working on now, they should immediately repeal and then replace at a later date," unquote. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called off a planned vote on a Senate health care bill after some members of his party balked over a Congressional Budget Office report that found it would add 22 million Americans to the ranks of the uninsured. Other Republicans said they'd oppose the Senate bill because it doesn't go far enough. Meanwhile, support for a nationwide single-payer health care system is growing. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren became the latest politician to back single-payer. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal Tuesday, Warren said, quote, "President Obama tried to move us forward with health care coverage by using a conservative model that came from one of the conservative think tanks that had been advanced by a Republican governor in Massachusetts. Now it's time for the next step, and the next step is single payer," she said. Billionaire investor Warren Buffett also came out in favor of single payer this week, saying, quote, "We are such a rich country, in a sense we can afford to do it," unquote. A recent poll by the Pew Research Center shows a full third of Americans are now in favor of a national single-payer system. However, on Friday, California Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon shelved a proposal to establish a single-payer system across California, saying the bill will not be voted on this year. The struggle over single payer comes amidst widespread backlash and protests against the Republicans' health care plan, which the Congressional Budget Office says would cause 22 million Americans to lose their health insurance over the next decade. In Washington, D.C., Planned Parenthood staged a people's filibuster against the legislation Tuesday. The protest included dozens of women dressing in red cloaks and white bonnets, inspired by the dystopian novel and TV series The Handmaid's Tale, about a totalitarian theocracy which overthrows the U.S. government and imposes power by subjugating women and controlling their reproductive rights. On Capitol Hill, demonstrators flooded the offices of several Republican senators in what they called a last stand to prevent a repeal of the Affordable Care Act. At a sit-in protest at the offices of Pennsylvania's Pat Toomey, protesters chanted, "Kill the bill, don't kill me." Similar protests targeted Senators Tom Cotton of Arkansas, Marco Rubio of Florida, Rob Portman of Ohio, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, where they were met by Murkowski's aide, Kevin Sweeney.
Senator Murkowski is a very deliberate senator. Senator Murkowski, and she's shown this in the past. She's shown this in the past that she wants to do what's right for Alaska, but she needs to know exactly what it is that she's doing. She wants to know what the impact this is going to be on Alaskans.
It's going to kill people. It's not hard to figure out.
22 million Americans from their insurance.
This bill already has actuarial tables attached to it, as obviously drafts, that show the only way these numbers come about through the CBO is if people die early.
During Wednesday's protests, police arrested 40 people on misdemeanor charges of unlawful crowding and obstructing. Meanwhile, activist disability rights group ADAPT launched a two-day-long sit-in at the office of Colorado Republican Senator Cory Gardner, staging a die-in and chanting, "Better to go to jail than die without Medicaid." 10 activists with ADAPT were arrested Thursday. For more, we go to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Stephanie Woodward, an organizer with ADAPT. Video went viral of her being ripped from her wheelchair and arrested for protesting outside Mitch McConnell's office. She has now been arrested while protesting 14 times. Let's go to that video clip of Stephanie Woodward being arrested. Stephanie Woodward's recent column for Vox is, "I was pulled out of my wheelchair by police. It could be worse. Trump care could pass." She joins us now from Washington, D.C., an organizer with ADAPT and a disability rights attorney. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Stephanie. Talk about what happened.
Well, a bunch of disability rights activists from ADAPT, about 60 of us, went to Mitch McConnell's office. Many of us were inside of his office, and those who couldn't fit in were outside in the hallway, and we staged a die-in to demonstrate that people with disabilities will die with these proposed cuts of over $800 billion in cuts to Medicaid, and we're not just going to sit around and be quiet when you're proposing to kill us.
So talk about what happened, how you organized, and explain just what ADAPT is, Stephanie.
Civil disobedience group. We engage in civil disobedience after every other step doesn't work. So we do meetings, we do advocacy in what people view as the polite way. And when that doesn't work, we do civil disobedience to prove that we will fight for our rights. And ADAPT has been around for over 30 years. We started with fighting for lifts on buses, which, proud to say, we clearly achieved, providing more access to everybody throughout our nation. And now we've mostly focused on long-term home and community-based services, meaning that we don't think that people with disabilities should be forced into nursing facilities just because they need help, or other institutions just because we need some help. We strongly believe that it's a right to live in liberty, a constitutional right to live in the community. So we fight for community-based services, and the proposed bill would make significant cuts to community-based services.
And talk about where you were, why you chose to target the senator you did, and then how the police responded to you and others in ADAPT.
Well, as the majority leader, I think that Mitch McConnell was an obvious choice for us. Leading this bill that would take away our life and liberty means that you're the person that we need to confront about this first. So that's why we chose Mitch McConnell. We stayed in his office. The people in the hallway were arrested first, mostly because they were the easiest to get to, I assume. And we were there for about an hour before they got to the Mitch McConnell's office and started carrying us out individually as well. And the police were doing their job, but we were doing our job, and it just so happens that our jobs conflicted that day.
So President Trump, when he was running for president, talked about Medicare and Medicaid. I want to go to May 21st, 2015, when he was speaking to the right-wing outlet, The Daily Signal.
I'm not going to cut Social Security like every other Republican, and I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid. Every other Republican's going to cut. And even if they wouldn't, they don't know what to do because they don't know where the money is. I do.
So that was Donald Trump 2 years ago. Stephanie Woodward, explain exactly what the cuts are that are proposed in the Republican health care plan.
So what we're seeing is over $800 billion in cuts to Medicaid. And for us in the disability community, that means that nursing facility services are a mandatory benefit under Medicaid. Home and community-based services, although they are oftentimes cheaper, are an optional service. So when states have caps or cuts to their Medicaid, what they have to do is get rid of their optional services first, because you have to do the mandatory things. So for people with disabilities, what that means is people who are living in the community will lose their community-based services and be forced into nursing facilities or be forced to live in the community without the supports that they need, leaving them in danger of losing their life or losing their liberty, depending on which way they choose to go.
What exactly would happen to you, Stephanie Woodward, if this Republican health care bill became law?
I want to be clear. I depended on Medicaid until I was 25. I am not dependent on Medicaid at all right now. However, there are millions of people with disabilities who are, and I was part of this group because I won't stand by and let my brothers and sisters with disabilities across the nation have their life and liberty in danger because of a bill. So while I may not be as impacted, the people I love do, and the people I don't know but I care about their lives will be impacted, and that's why we all came together. There's a very diverse group of us, and everyone would be impacted in different ways, but none of us want to see this go through.
Stephanie Woodward, I want to thank you for being with us, organizer with ADAPT, disability rights attorney. Video of her being ripped from her wheelchair and arrested for protesting outside Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office went viral last week. We'll link to your column in Vox. I was pulled out of my wheelchair by police. It could be worse. Trump care could pass. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we go to Michael Leidy of National Nurses United to talk about single payer and what happened in California. It passed in the state Senate, but then was pulled in the state assembly. We'll find out why. Stay with us.
We've been covering the union drive among Yale's graduate student teachers for some time. If you recall, they built a structure opposite the main building of the Yale Corporation and staffed it night and day, all during their hunger strike and afterwards, up until graduation. Right after graduation, when all the undergraduate students had gone home, the corporation lost no time in having the structure torn down. This video from Local 33.
Let's go.
It's really a shameful day for Yale. I'm very proud of what we built.
As they say, this is just the beginning. By the way, in that very same spot in Beinecke Plaza, there were shanties built in 1986 to teach students what it was like to live in apartheid South Africa. After a couple of days, the Yale Corporation had those shanties torn down, and those of us inside were arrested. But that was 1986, and students were enraged. After posting bail, we returned to Beinecke to be greeted by 1,000 students. The shanties were speedily rebuilt, and they stayed there for 2 years. We end with more of our video from the big demonstration on graduation day to support Local 33. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.